Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, sponsored by SeekOut. I'm John Tippett. I'm the head of product for SeekOut. If you aren't familiar with SeekOut, I hope you'll go to seekout.io after this webinar and see what we're all about. As we're getting started, I just have three housekeeping items. The first is the webinar will work best if you're using Chrome, Firefox, or Opera. If you're on another browser and have technical problems, you might need to sign out and sign back in with one of those. Second thing is, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat on the right-hand side. We'll try to get to all those. And we'd be really grateful if you filled out the short poll about the webinar. It's also on the right-hand side under poll. So with those out of the way, I'm so happy to introduce Shally to you. Shally Steckerl is the founder and the president of the Sourcing Institute. He's an author, a frequent speaker on all things recruiting and sourcing, and he's just generally a fountain of knowledge. We're delighted to have him here to help teach us about his strategies for reaching candidates with cold email campaigns. So take it away, Shally. Although we seem to have lost Shally. Shally need to come back on stage. We are give us a moment here. We love webinar hosting technology. Shally's back. Well, great. Shally, I just introduced you, so go ahead and share your screen and take it away from me.
Thanks. Yeah, I was in here, and then all of a sudden I got kicked out. I'm like, hey, was it something I said?
Not yet.
Yeah. So soon in the presentation, I'm already getting kicked out. All right, cool. So I have the screen slides, or the slides ready to go right here. Let me see if I can share this. My first time using this platform. And I already practiced a little bit, but I'm going to try to do the screen sharing. Hopefully this works. Your entire screen. And
there you go.
There. It should be the title slide.
Looks perfect.
Title slide. Great. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Our topic for the day is something that's been very near and dear to me for many years now. I have to admit, this will be my first public admission. For the last roughly about 7 years, I've been having a lot of personal struggles with email. Email and I broke up, and we didn't get along for some time, because email wasn't working for me. I was not getting the results that I used to get. I used to teach classes all over the world about how we can get 70, 80% response rates with email, which is what I used to get. And things just really deteriorated very quickly, and I got all the way down to where I was only getting about 30 or 40% response rates, which is half as much. So very disappointed. I went into a temper tantrum and tried to figure out what was going on. Long story short, after many years of research and trial and error, I arrived at what you have in front of you today, which is the new outreach hacks that should get you back to 70 or 80% response rates. Thank goodness, because it was kind of lonely without email there for a while. Anyway, so we're going to talk about outreach hacks today. Feel free to ask questions through the chat interface. I'm sure the SeekOut team will be more than happy to interpret them for me as they come in, and we'll also pause a couple of times to gather them. And if I don't get to your questions live, we can always cover them later on in an email, etc. For those of you who don't know me, here's a little sort of intro slide. My company is tsi-corp.com. We're an education company, the leading recruitment and sourcing trainers in the world. Been doing it for about 22 years. And I'm also the founder of the sourcingfoundation.org, a nonprofit that helps people with disabilities join our industry. So that's the quick Shally bio. All right, so why are we here? Well, we're here because I had to stop doing what wasn't working. And when I figured out what the problem was, and I'm not going to tell you the long road to recovery that it was, I was really surprised about some of the very different ways in which systems today, technology, software, servers, the internet, whatever you want to call it, tries to interfere with our communication because of let's just say, the flood of spam and unsolicited email. So unfortunately, professional business communications, recruiting communications that we depend on, they get drowned out or they get caught in these filters that are designed to stop spammers. So we're not spamming, but we do end up basically getting mixed in with kind of all the bad stuff that's out there. So I've found a way to get around that. And there's three main focuses here for this presentation. The first is to use the 7x7 method, which we'll talk about. The second is to forget about open rates, forget about click rates. Anything that tracks open rates and click rates is by its own nature already going to deteriorate your results. The fact that it's simply tracking open rates and click rates actually delivers fewer emails. So you do get the click rates and the open rates on the ones that get through, but fewer get through, which is ultimately against our objective. And then the third component has to do with sort of prep, the testing, timing, tracking, and I will also give you some templates that I found to be uniquely successful in the modern recruiting environment. So let's jump right in. When it comes to content, the number one thing about content is personalization. When I talk about the 7x7, what I mean is 7 points of personalization and 7 touch points. Now, when I say 7 points of personalization, most recruiters roll their eyes and go, oh my God, that's too much, or no way, or ain't nobody got time for that. Or I've even heard things like, oh my gosh, that's really stocky, or whatever. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. It's actually really, really easy. But before I jump into that, I also want to tell you about the rest of the content, which is equally as important. However, it's often forgotten about. The number one thing you should not do, so we're going to start with a don't. The number one don't is to solicit people directly. Soliciting means you're asking them to apply. Even though you might not consider that a solicitation, when you are directly contacting someone and saying, I would like for you to apply for this job, that is a solicitation. So we're going to avoid that. We're going to get to that point another way, but we're not going to directly and overtly solicit. We're going to make it about networking. We're not going to recruit them for a job. We're going to reach out for a more general purpose that will lead to potentially them applying for this job. Then we need to keep it simple, especially because of mobile. Mobile is almost the majority, not almost, it is the majority of how people open their emails these days. They might read it again on the desktop, but most of the time people check their email on their mobile phones. So if your message doesn't fit into a screen and doesn't scroll friendly on a mobile phone, it's very likely it'll just end up getting deleted, ignored, or just move to the bottom of the pile. We also want to make sure that we include text, lots and lots of text. Text will always beat images. Everybody tells you HTML emails are better, nicer, prettier, etc. But the truth is human beings prefer text. Survey after survey, time and time again, from all the research that I did, has concluded that text will trump images. Fancy, pretty images do get higher conversion rates, but they get fewer opens or fewer deliveries. So in other words, if you have 2 emails, one plain text and one very image and HTML intense, the HTML one might have a higher percentage of opens among the people who open them and receive them, but more people actually read the plain text. So you might have 50 or 60 people open the text one and read it, but only 20 open the HTML version with images, and you might have a really high conversion rate because of the 20 that opened it, you know, a good percentage of them actually take a call to action. However, the numbers don't lie. So avoid images, avoid fancy formatting, and finally, in the content, as crisp as you can, ask 3 or more questions. Then comes the 7 points of personalization. So as you're sitting there rolling your eyes, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do 7 points of personalization, or where am I going to get that? It's actually really easy. Let me kind of read it to you the way it would come across in an email. Hey, Shally, happy Monday. I found your information on GitHub, and I noticed that you work at Fiserv in HR as a senior sourcing consultant in Atlanta. That's it. So that's literally one sentence. It's like a greeting and a sentence, and you've already included 7 different ways to personalize. Their name, the day of the week, the source, their company, their function or department, their title, and their location. It's that simple. And all of this can be had from a very simple social profile, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. It doesn't take a whole lot of research to figure out what these components are. So once you have your concise, crisp message, and you've written it, rewritten it, you've sent it to a couple of friends and had them read it to make sure it sounds good, you've deleted anything that you can delete, all the extra words, make it as short as possible, break things up with blank lines, have 3-sentence paragraphs, and you have your nice call to action. Call to action can be a lot of things. It can be reply back, click here, call me, anything as long as you have a call to action. Biggest mistake that I see as far as content is not asking the reader to do something. If you don't ask them to do something, then that's exactly what they're going to do. Nothing. So even if it's a simple just please reply, that's a call to action. And then you want to have a compelling message. You've got to compete with a lot of other garbage. So the subject line is going to be one of the easiest ways to get people to open your message. What we found is anywhere between 8 and 12 words in the subject line is good. 1 or 2 word sentences or 1 or 2 word subject lines actually don't work very well unless you already know the person. But with strangers, with initial contact, 1 or 2 words actually don't work. 8 to 12 seems to be the happy space. Then you also want to make sure that you include the action, the benefit, and the clarity. Action is simple. What are you asking them to do? Benefit, what's in it for them? Why should they open it? Why should they care? And clarity, what's this about? How do you remove skepticism? Finally, some housekeeping. Don't ever use all caps and don't ever use symbols. $, hash, @ exclamation, none of those are good. All they're ever going to do is actually increase your spam score, which might decrease your chance of the message getting through. Words like opportunity and attention and text with gaps also trigger negative points against you in the spam score. Now let's get to the plan. So I told you the first part of the 7. Here's the other part of the 7. It's 7 messages. So you're going to personalize the message 7 different ways, and then you're going to contact them. It's 7 touch points. You're going to contact them 7 times. What you see in front of you here is a 14-day plan. This works for most situations. If you work in a temp environment where you have talent that needs to be, the sense of urgency is much higher, you're filling jobs in 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, you don't have the luxury of 2 weeks, you can compress this. Instead of waiting 2 to 3 days in steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, you can go back to a 1-day schedule and you could complete this in essentially a week. But for the most part, this is a 14-day plan. Now, if you work with senior level executives or scientists and in industries where the cadence is slower, you can make this instead of a 14-day plan, you can make it a 21-day plan or a 30-day plan. But like I said, the average, the standard, this fits most cases, and it's a 14-day plan. The first email is like we talked about, crisp, compelling, personalized, strong subject line, action, benefit, clarity. You're going to get 8 to 10% response rates on that email. Not what I'm used to, but I've noticed that what's happened, and I'll give you the secret and the biggest aha moment that I had was the second biggest, the biggest one I'm going to share for a little bit later, but the second biggest aha moment that I had in this whole process of learning how to do this was that when you send the first message, it very often doesn't get delivered. It sits in quarantine. So there's essentially an unspoken rule that if you email someone only once, you're probably a spammer. And that's why these messages sit around and wait. When you send a second message, the second one gets through, and sometimes the first one gets through as well. So what I've turned to doing is I'll send my first email or in-mail. This could also be a LinkedIn in-mail. Then I wait a day, 24 hours later, and what I do the next day is I essentially send the first email again. There's a template section in the handouts that you'll see what I'm talking about. But basically, the second message is really just the first message with the subject line, just want to make sure you received my message, or something to that effect. 48 hours later, 2 days later, we send a second email, which is now a different one. Wait a couple of days, send a third one. Wait a couple to 3 days, send a fourth. 3 more days, send a fifth. And then 2 more days, and we send the final or last ditch. I have all 7 of these templates in the files that you will receive, so don't worry. I'm not just giving you the high level here. You're going to get the full tactical stuff as well. So this is the plan. This is the cadence. Now, why this works, and I put this into a visual because some of us are more visual learners. Why this works is if you send the first email day 1 and you only get 10% response rates, your response rates aren't very good. You might have anywhere between 10 and 20%. That's what that graph, the area chart behind the columns shows, is between 10 and 20%. But if you add that 10 or 20% to the 10% from day 2, and the 10% from day 3, and the 10% from day 4, and so on, by the time you got to day 14, you are now close to 80%. So one single email doesn't do the trick. Now, I want you to remember that you're not sending all 7 emails to every single person. You're only sending email 2 to people who did not open or reply to email 1. The same thing with email 3. So by the time you're sending out email 6 or 7, the amount of people that are receiving your message should be far smaller. You might have started, say, with 100 people and 20 replied. Day 2, you're sending it to 80. Another 10 replied. Now, on day 4, you're sending it to only 60. 10 more replied. Now, on day 7 or 8 or 9, whatever your cadence is, you're now sending only to 60, then 50, then 40, and so on. That's why this works. It's the cumulative total that gets you to 80%. If you feel like this is too aggressive, think about this. You don't even know if they got the message. And that's the problem. That's what I was experiencing and why I was frustrated and why I'd given it up. I didn't think it was that the message wasn't getting through. I thought it was just, oh, there's too much noise, there's too much spam, my message isn't good enough. I blamed myself and I blamed people. But I didn't think that the system was the problem. And I'm here to tell you that a big reason that our emails were not opened or responded to is the system. The system is the problem. Just from day 1 to day 2, because you send a second email, you actually get your message delivered simply because they don't think you're a spammer anymore since you're sending a second message. So it really does add up. Now, if you're wondering what time of day, it really doesn't matter. I've started campaigns on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I wouldn't start a campaign on a Monday or Friday. I wouldn't start one on a Monday or Friday, but you certainly can. It's not going to hurt you. It's just I've had slightly a marginal improvement on my campaigns when I start them on on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. However, if the second or third or whatever email falls on a Monday or a Friday or a Sunday, it's okay. Sundays are okay, so you don't have to be careful about weekends. People actually read their email evenings, during the weekdays, and on weekends. So feel free to do it anytime. Now, as far as the time of day, you might have the ability to program this. In some systems, you might not. But there really is no specific rhyme or reason to it. As you can see from the distribution here, whether you send it from 6 in the morning through midnight, the response rates are pretty much about the same. The biggest difference is 6 a.m. to noon, where you get about 38% open rates or deliverability, which is slightly higher. It's 9% higher than in the evening hours. But really, anywhere between 6 a.m. and midnight is pretty much fair game. Between midnight and 6 a.m., though, in the wee early hours of the morning, deliverability rates are really low. So basically, start sending things and deliver things only around the time between 6 a.m. and midnight. That's pretty much it, any day of the week. A couple of other deliverability hacks. You want to make sure that your email includes only one link. Keep it short, keep it simple, no pictures. If you have to use pictures, break up larger images into smaller pieces, or make sure that you have more text. You don't want to have a ton of images and a smaller percentage comparatively of text. Also, if you're going to use HTML, check it, test it. There's a bunch of online tools that allow you to test your HTML to make sure it's error-free. Why? Because messages with errored HTML don't get delivered. They sometimes get quarantined or deleted without even sending to the recipient. You also want to make sure that you mention the reader's name. Even if you're not going to use my recommended 7x7, at the very, very least, mention their name. Emails that have a personalized name almost always deliver at a higher rate than emails that do not. When you write the message, you're going to write as if this person was your friend, and you're going to start in a traditional letter form, meaning you're going to have a hi, Shally, comma, line break, paragraph, paragraph, signature line. And like I said, don't use any of the funny characters, but also in the body of the email, not just in the subject line, in the body of the email, avoid using $signs and exclamation marks. Just avoid it. You really don't need exclamation marks. If you want to make a point, you can make it other ways. You can emphasize it other ways. Okay, so let's move on here. And wanted to just check in real quick. Do we have any questions from the online meeting there?
Yeah, we've got a bunch are around kind of best practices. So there are questions about what about including GIFs or GIFs, or just arguing about how you're supposed to pronounce them. But what about including GIFs? What about including a link to calendars scheduling like Calendly, or personalized videos? Those are three kind of body content questions. And then there was a question about using emojis or names in the subject line in particular.
Okay, so the link to your calendar is counted as a link. So if you're going to have a link to your calendar, just have that as the call to action. In other words, I'd like to set up a time for us to talk. Click here to find time on my calendar. Don't have a link to the job posting and a link to the calendar. If you're going to send a link to the, it's fine to do that. But if that's your intended action, if what you want is the person to get on your calendar, then that's the link that you include. Put the notes around the job in text, or say that you are happy to send them additional information. But if you provide them two links, instead of clicking on both, what happens is more often they click on neither. So basically, if you're going to use the calendar, just use the calendar. If you're going to send them to a job posting page, send them to a job posting page, but don't do both. GIFs, same as images. If you're going to use them, just make sure you have enough text. Nothing wrong with GIFs, and there's nothing wrong with images. What you don't want to have is a GIF-heavy email that has very little text. So you want to have about 70% text versus the amount of real estate covered by GIFs. And then embedded videos is the same thing. However, embedded videos don't necessarily count as a link. So if you're sending them a link to your calendar and there's an embedded video, the embedded video should actually just act when they click on the email. It should just load right then and there. And if they click on it and they go to another page, it's technically a link. So, again, if you want them, choose what you want them to do, right? If it's really an embedded video and you want a link to your calendar, then they should be able to play the video from the email without leaving their email and then click on the link for your calendar. If the video is actually a link, then just send that. Say, hey, I've got this video I want you to check out. Then on another email, subsequent email later on, you follow up with a different link. Remember, we have 7 points of contact here, so we can do 7 different links if you wanted to. Then what was the third one? No, that was all 3, right? Did I cover all 3?
Yeah, I think that was it. Is the GIFs, calendar links, personalized videos, and then names and emojis in the subject.
Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so I wanted to also share with you that SeekOut has a very easy to use email nurturing tool that's built in. And with the SeekOut messaging app, you can link to your email account if you use Outlook, Exchange, Gmail, one of those. And then you can create a campaign or choose from a recorded set of campaigns that, your playbook, so to speak. Then you can add as many steps as you want, and you can merge fields. The fields are coming in from the data that SeekOut is collecting from profiles. So name, company, title, and then the day of the week, which obviously doesn't come from the profile, but you get my point. You have the option to delay anywhere from 1 to 10 days between each step. So you can, as I mentioned before, you can use my 14-day plan, or you can do 7 messages in 7 days, or you can do 7 messages in 21 days. In fact, you can do 7 messages in 70 days if you'd like. That's about as far wide as you want to space things out anyway. Then you can add candidates either individually, or you can save people to a project and add the project into a SeekOut campaign, and then have these messages sent out to these people in step. The cool thing about this is not only can you save your playbooks and your templates for future use, but when you have a live campaign, if you drop new candidates in, they automatically start at step 1. So you did a sourcing project, saved all the leads, created a playbook, started a campaign, and added your project to the campaign. Come back a week later, you don't have enough candidates. You add a bunch of new candidates to the project, and they go right into the first step of the email outreach campaign and follow through with that. So I can show you here a screenshot. I'm actually going to be able to go live. It's easier than I thought. But I'm showing you here a screenshot of my 7x7 example, and you can see here there's the 7 steps, and where it's got, wait a day, wait 2 days, 2 days, 3 days, 3 days, 2 days, and then it stops. And if at any point in time one of those is triggered, then the subsequent steps don't continue on through. So when someone replies, they don't forcibly get the next message and the next message. It pauses the campaign when the person replies. By the way, it also pauses when it bounces and other things like that, which of course would make a lot of sense. But here's the messaging, as I was mentioning before here. And I've started a campaign for this nonprofit event that I'm doing in Hawaii. Here you can see there's only 1 step in this one because I just started it, but I've added a bunch of people, and already 5% of them have opened and 3% have bounced. It's only just begun, so not a whole lot of data there, but you can see other campaigns that I've done in the past, and you can see that there are multiple steps, and it gives you the tracking for all the different portions of that. So it's super easy to just add things to a project and jump right from there into candidates. So I'm going to glance through the templates. These templates are here for your perusal. These are essentially for you to modify. So I'm not going to spend time today reading them out loud to you and insult your intellect with that. Just remember that the bracketed different color areas are where you're going to do your personalization. So you can see how easy it is to personalize. Now, I'll show you another secret right here. I found that the subject line that's one-on-one, like Shally, Amy, one-on-one, those kinds of subject lines are actually really, really effective. So I'm using that for my first email. Shally, Amy, confidential chat about, whatever, let's just say staff counsel or attorney roles in Atlanta or whatever. Then you can see here I've got day of the week, their name, company, function, etc. Then I've also got the second one, which is just simply saying, hey, I'm following up on my email from yesterday. Want to make sure you saw the note below. And then what I do is I paste in a copy of the first email. So basically, the second email is pretty much just the first email with the want to make sure you saw the note below, and I manually type in the forwarded message part here. So this is in the template, and they think they're getting a forwarded message, but it's actually a boilerplate because the second email, the second part of it is still mail merge, still has the merge fields in it. Then we've got the third and fourth, checking back in, giving you one more try. Things like, I know you're super busy, but I've reached out a couple of times. Any chance you can get back to me? Then I've got a pretty funny one I like a lot for my 5th email. For my 6th one, I do kind of is there someone else I should be reaching out to? Kind of asking for referrals. And then I've got my last ditch which just, I'm giving up sort of, kind of boilerplate, and then I'm done. So that brings us to 1 minute overtime. Apologies for keeping you a little bit late. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Shally. There are a couple more questions. Oh, there's one about tracking status of emails in SeekOut. SeekOut does have tracking of open and reply, and then it'll stop the campaign whenever anyone replies to that. But if you have other questions for Shally about candidate engagement in general, add those into the question section, and we'll try to get to those right away. But we know that this was going to be a half hour, and we want to respect your time, so we'll pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm good with time. I'm happy to stay in. If there's any other questions, now's a good time to ask me. Otherwise, you can always shoot me a note. I'm sure you know how to find me.
There's a question about why only emails. And so, Shally, you can address that. Partly, this webinar, we were just focused on email outreach, but I'm sure that, Shally, you can talk a little about multimodal and reaching out in different ways as well.
Yeah, so typically I have in my cadence, in my mix, it's still the same 14-day plan, but I mix in all the other multimodal or the multimedia components. So if I were to go back and if you go back and look at the slides number 7, which has the day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got a version of that where day 2 is essentially first email repeated and then also text. Day 4 is social media 1, day 6 is social media 2, etc. So I run in parallel. The reason we didn't cover that today is twofold. Number one, we wanted to focus on lead nurturing via email. Number 2, I didn't want to give you too much to try all at once. If you start doing this and you're consistent about your 14-day plan, you're going to see results. By adding text and Snapchat and Facebook, you're simply going to increase your results. It's going to get better, but you have to get into the mode of planning your 7-day plan, your 7x7, personalizing and putting things into a plan. Because if you don't do that, just going to Facebook is no different. It's no different than just sending one email, right? One Facebook message or one email are really not. If you're going to do Facebook, you're going to need to hit them on Facebook 2 or 3 times, on Twitter 2 or 3 times, etc. So there's a plan that fits all of that in. It's just, this is kind of like the first version, right? Like if you haven't been in the gym in a while, you kind of got to just get there and maybe hit the treadmill for a few minutes. You don't want to all of a sudden try to run a marathon, right? So this is sort of your training plan, right? You get this going, and once it's up and running, we can then mix in the rest of it. Good question, though.
Question, Shally, about your initial outreach mail looked like it was pretty long, and wondering, just your thoughts on that. Someone was wondering if it was too long.
No, it's not too long. It's a kind of a visual. I want to say it's like a trick of the mind, so to speak. If you look at it, it's just the way that it seems in PowerPoint for a couple of reasons. One of them is the text kind of gets a little jumbled up, and then the other is I have all those merge fields in there. Here, let me show you. All right, I uploaded the slides, by the way, so you should be able to get the slides now from the meeting. But I'm going to go all the way to that page so you can see what I'm talking about. There's the merge fields there, which make it look a little bulky. But really, there's 3 sentences in paragraph 1. Then there's a 1-sentence value prop, maybe 3 sentences in paragraph 2, 2 sentences in paragraph 3, and then the closing sentence. It looks bigger than what it is. When you shrink this down to a mobile screen, it actually is pretty reasonable. But there's also, you can change this and adapt it to your needs. There's also an alternate. So here's a real example of them. This is what a real email looks like, right? So this is what the template looks like. And you're right, it's kind of noisy. It looks noisy and busy. That's because of all the brackets. But look at what it looks like when it's an actual message. It's much easier to read. It kind of rolls off the tongue real well, so to speak, right? But there's also an alternate email 1, which is much shorter. And then you've got the 2. So it looks bulkier than it is. You there?
Yeah. So Shally, I don't know if, I think we should probably wrap up. If folks have other questions, you can definitely reach out to support@seekout.io, and we'll forward on the emails to Shally and respond to any questions you have. And if you know of any colleagues who missed the seminar and want to come back and watch it, you use the same link you used to join here today, and you'll be able to get your recording of it in just a few minutes. But Shally, thank you very much for educating us on email campaigns and best practices. And thanks everyone for joining. We're really happy to see so many of you on, and hope that you got something useful out of it. If you have time, click on polls on the right of the screen and let us know what you thought of the webinar. And we'll see you back here the next time we do a webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you guys. Take care. Good luck.